What's going on, Raider Nation? It's me, Raider Pirate, doing a solo show here today because the Oakland Knight is actually preparing to go out to training camp. So he's packing up and asked me if I could come on and go ahead and drive the car solo today. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what we spoke about yesterday, the Silver and Black report, or I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but they released an article today talking about what we spoke about yesterday, which was the depth chart and their thoughts and their opinions. And they brought up the two things that we talked about, which was the Lee Smith, Clive Walford, and pretty much the Menelik Watson, Austin Howard, their thoughts on that. And they also included a couple of guys on defense, which is what we're going to talk about here today. So before we kind of go into that, I mean, I wanted to touch base. I made a comment yesterday about it would be a surprise if Lee Smith were on this roster moving into the regular season, week one. And I don't mean that to be shocking or like, what's this guy talking about? I simply meant it because if you look at this head coach and general manager, what they're doing is they're putting together a team that is extremely scheme versatile. So they are able to stay on the field, switch alignments, and counter whatever it is that an offense or a defense is trying to throw at them. So it's easier to have guys that can play defensive end and defensive tackle, linebackers that can play inside and still have the athletic ability to be able to switch to the outside, to stay on the field for three downs as opposed to, linebackers like Lofton, who could only be on the field in most cases on first down last year. Safeties that can switch positions. You don't have a guy that's an in-the-box safety and a guy that just plays the single high, but your ability to switch them out like we have currently with our the safeties that we have on the roster. The only thing that really isn't too versatile is the cornerbacks in this particular defense. But offensively, again, some very similar things with the tight ends, guys that can block, but also guys that can go down the field and catch the ball, stretch the defense, and be part of the offense in terms of being options, first, second, third, that sort of thing. Running backs that can catch the ball but can also run with the ball, guys that can go up the middle but also take it to the outside. So these things are, again, what we would call, scheme versatile. Whatever scheme you're using, this player sort of fits into that particular scheme. So what I was talking about with Lee Smith is, again, this team seems to be going away from having those one-dimensional guys. You saw they released Lofton. He was a one-dimensional guy. When you take a look at a guy like Lee Smith, punishing blocker, big man. I saw him on 95.7 The Game with Papa and Lund last year. He came into the studio, and he was just a gigantic human being. Punishing run blocker, decent pass blocker, doesn't really give you anything in the passing game. I mean, obviously, he caught a touchdown last year. I believe it was his first. I don't follow Lee Smith religiously like some of the other guys. But when you throw your offense out there, he's not going to augment the offense in any way except for being able to add some protection. And that's the key that I kind of wanted to touch on. Last year, we needed that, Webb and Howard on the line. Teams were blitzing. You keep in your fullback, you keep in your tight end, and, they help out when you're in those types of pressure situations. This year, I think the offensive line is going to be much better than it was last year. I think the chemistry is going to be a lot better. I believe that if, everybody stays healthy, if Hudson stays healthy and he's able to call out all the line calls, they're going to handle blitzes a lot better. They're just going to be better altogether, which means that you're probably not going to need your fullback and your tight end to stay back there and to help out with the offensive line. So if that's not the case, and that's obviously going to be the case, you're going to run into certain teams that are going to bring a lot of pressure, right? And so you're going to need your tight end to block in order to, depending on the down and the distance. So I'm not saying that it's not something that you do utilize. I'm just saying that it's not going to be a key factor. Like when you're coming in, you've got a young quarterback, you're installing a new system, you want time, you want to help out your offensive line, you don't want to get a lot of turnovers, things like that. A guy like Lee Smith plays a pivotal role. I think as Derek Carr matures, as this offensive line begins to gel and they get better players at their positions, the need for a guy like that begins to diminish just a little bit, or potentially a lot. You can also go with things like you're tackle eligible, okay? Lee Smith basically is a tackle eligible light, right? So he basically, it's like having another tackle in there. So if Vidal Alexander or Kirkland or John Feliciano, any of these guys can, catch a ball, basically you can line one of those guys up as a tackle eligible. We did it a few years back. The Kansas City Chiefs were doing it, where you're lining up 6 offensive linemen and then basically running your counter trays and doing some different things of that nature with pulling guards and things like that. So that's, that becomes another possibility. You don't need a guy like Lee Smith to do that. Lee Smith's a great guy. I'm sure he's a great character guy. Like I said, I watched the interview. I enjoyed the interview. Seems like a team player. And for what he brings to the table, I think he did a very good job last year. I think if this team wants to make the next leap, then they're going to have to become a little bit more versatile in terms of, having the first, second, third, and fourth option available on every single play. Again, when we trotted out there with Lee Smith, you knew that 90% of the time we were either going to run the ball or Lee Smith wasn't really going to be involved in as the first or second check down or whatever it was. So you knew that you could take the tight end basically out of the formation. So with Clive Walford going in there, even with a guy like Gabe Holmes going in there, Michael Rivera, if he improves on his blocking, you really open it up. You make the offense much more dynamic, which is what I believe that they're going to try as hard as they can do this year, right? They're going to sit there and they're going to say, how can we get as many people out? First, can we set up solid blocking? And then second, can we call the right plays? And then third, can we get everybody out into the pattern so that we could take advantage of whatever mismatch the defense is presenting? So, that's why I made the point that I did of, basically it would be a surprise, in my opinion, if Lee Smith made the roster. Now, again, that's not a prediction. That's just, for me, I will be surprised, right? I don't know anything. Nobody said anything. I haven't read anything. It's just, for me, myself, seeing how this coach and how this general manager really are putting together the most versatile players. They're putting the guys that can fit into any system so that you're not tied into one system together, and seeing primarily how they're doing it on the offense. But in a few ways, like I said, it just makes sense. Not even if you're looking at one particular system, but just in terms of football, right? I don't know if any of you guys, may sound silly to some of you guys, but if you play like Madden football or something like that, right? Or even if you design plays and you look at, okay, I want to design an offense. If you're a coach, I've been talking to a couple of coaches over the last couple of weeks, just to kind of figure out a little bit more about, what I might be missing in terms of this defense and this offense, and to help you guys out so that you guys can kind of understand those things too. And, both of them have told me the same thing. To a man, you want the guys that are out there to be able to do as many things as possible. You're better off with a utility player than you are with a particular type of player, not in a base offense. So again, if you look at, let's say you run the wishbone, okay? it doesn't make sense for you to have a guy that's a good downfield blocking wide receiver, but he's also a game changer like, a Randy Moss or something of that nature. You're going to be wasting that guy in that particular system, right? Or if you run the run and shoot and you've got, Jerome Bettis is your running back. Well, he's only got 5 guys to block for him. He's a big guy. He's a rumbler. He wants to run right up the gut. Your offensive line is more geared toward pass blocking. So, it's probably not going to be a good fit. And again, that's one of the things that we always hear about is this guy fits in this system. He'll be best in this particular type of system. Well, what the Raiders have been doing is they have been going out there and they've been getting guys that are going to fit in multiple systems. And we saw last year that they ran out of multiple formations. How much of the time that they were in a 43 as opposed to a 43 or a 52 or, ran the wide 9 or brought Khalil Mack over the center. I mean, how often they were in the dime. It doesn't mean as much as it used to. In the 80s, you primarily ran out of one base formation. You ran a 43. It was very, very simple. Seattle is an example of that. You kind of run this 43. You're asking people to do, what it is they do. You run a few different plays. But Seattle is also an example of a hybrid defense where they switch in and out of their defenses. They could switch at the snap of the ball. They could switch, when they go out there, they could choose to stay in that formation or based on what the offense is doing. They can adjust on the fly with the personnel that they have. Right now, other defenses can't do that. If you're running a hard-nosed 34, you got a big, huge defensive tackle that's just a run stuffer. You got 2 defensive ends that are just primarily, run stuffers. Your linebackers are providing the majority of your pass rush. It's a little bit, it's more difficult if a team all of a sudden jumps out into a run and shoot, for example, 5 wide receivers. Well, your linebackers are going to have to cover a wide receiver. You got to get through that play, and then you're going to have to send in your dime defense, right, or your nickel defense, whichever you prefer as a coach. So having the versatility to sort of line up to a particular strength so that at the snap of the ball you can get there. But also if they decide, okay, we're going to go from this formation like the Patriots do, and then we're just going to, boom, we're going to shoot out, very reminiscent of what Hugh Jackson kind of used to do, kind of come up to the line and show you one look and then all of a sudden break into a totally different look, which will confuse the defense. This team is capable of doing that. They're capable of starting out in a 43 and then switching to a 34 if they have to, or going into a dime with the same personnel on the field, still able to generate a pass rush, still able to cover all the zones that they need to cover, still able to match up man on man, and still have an athlete that can cover another athlete. And that's an extremely important thing, I think, for this football team to be able to do if they're going to be competitive, particularly when you get toward the end of the season and you begin moving into the playoffs, right, where you're going to see things that you've never seen before. So it'll be interesting to watch these guys in the preseason and see if I'm correct in that assumption. I may be totally off, and if I am, then that's obviously that's fine. Then we can come on here and we could talk about what we do see, which has always been the plan. But if we do see again that they do come out and they switch alignments and they're getting a tremendous amount of pressure in the middle on passing downs from Mario Edwards Jr. and Jihad Ward. And, we see what the linebackers are doing and how they're being utilized and what the depth is going to look like and who's making a lot of plays. Then we can sit down and say, okay, it does look like they're going this way, or they're going to stay with what they were doing last year, and that indeed is going to be the defense moving forward. Like some people believe. Some people believe that they're going to run a particular defense that they ran last year, and there's going to be no changes. They're just going to run it better with better personnel. And then there's people like myself that believe that they will be moving more toward the Seattle style of defense. So we're going to go ahead and take a break and run our commercial. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the second half of what the second part of what they talked about in that article, which is on the defensive side of the ball, Jihad Ward and the safety position. So we'll be right back.
Carpets is celebrating the holidays with a huge inventory clearance sale. We have the best prices and guaranteed installation. Why would you buy anywhere else? Whether you're looking for laminate, vinyl, carpet, tile, or wood, we have it all. Save up to 50% on selected items. Room size rugs, only $69. Visit Carpets at one of our 6 Bay Area locations or call us at 1-800-355-4MMM.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. I was trying to figure out who released the article. I believe it's Silver and Black Pride. I can't find it now. But going through basically some of the news here, a few interesting things that have kind of popped up. Howie Long basically is going to be speaking tonight to this new Raider team. Also, David Carr is on hand at training camp. So those of you that are out there at training camp right now, those a couple of big names that are going to be out there talking to this football team, getting them prepared for the season that's coming up. Also, another article, a quote-unquote NFL personnel director not sold on Derek Carr, questions his poise under pressure. I don't know too many quarterbacks who, when they're under pressure, have a ton of poise, right? It's so silly. We saw what happens to Tom Brady when he's under pressure, right? We saw it in the Super Bowls. He didn't play too well. He lost every Super Bowl where he was under pressure. And this is, quote unquote, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, right? So again, you take these things with a grain of salt. The guy doesn't even say who he is. Well, Levi Damien says that there's a personnel director that's not sold. When this guy's getting rushed and thrown to the ground and knocked around and punched in the face, he doesn't seem to have the it factor. Well, again, like I said, most quarterbacks don't. It's easy to be back there when your uniform is clean. Guys are breaking open on routes, and you just got to get them the ball, right? So, a lot of these articles you just got to take with a grain of salt, and just look at it and say, in most cases, that's going to be true across the board, not only for third-year players, but for experienced guys that have been to, the Super Bowl multiple times and have proven that when there's guys in your face and you can't do anything, you're not that great of a quarterback. So not that big of a deal. The defensive depth chart, again, like we said, Dan Williams is behind Justin Ellis at the nose tackle position, and Jihad Ward has moved into, at least for this particular game, the defensive tackle position, the swing tackle position. So when they're in their 34 defense, Jelly will be in there. When they move into their dime, or if they choose to run a 43, Jihad Ward will be taking snaps with the first team at defensive tackle, not a defensive end. Again, a lot of people kept saying he's going to be a defensive end. Why would they draft a defensive end? Blah, 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 blah. He can play defensive end like Mario Edwards Jr., who's also starting over Danico Autry. But he can also play in the interior. Now, what I see is, again, in passing situations, Ward and Edwards sliding into the middle because they're both close to 300 pounds. They both slide into the middle. And Autry will be at the defensive end. Khalil Mack will be at the other defensive end. You'll have the two pass rushers in the middle, and then you'll have guys like Irvin coming off the edge, and maybe they'll bring in Shalik Calhoun, or when Aldon Smith comes back, he'll also play. That's a very, very, very formidable pass rushing style of defensive line. Again, we don't want to put too much into this, only because of the fact that Dan Williams came into camp. He's the starter. You know what you got. He played all year. You know what you got. You don't know what you have in Jihad Ward. And you don't know if Justin Ellis is capable of holding it down for the long run, right? Now, if you kind of take a look at this again, what you're really looking at is Reggie brought in these guys. If you look at the offensive line, Reggie brings in Osamelli, he brings in Hudson. He drafts Jackson and Watson. Obviously he brought in Penn as well. But now he's going out there and he's got guys like Vidal Alexander, right? And Vaughn and a couple of these other guys, Kirkland, and depending on if these guys even make the team or not. But the idea here is, Feliciano, the idea here is when these guys hit the end of their contracts, obviously you're not going to pay them again, right? So when you look at the amount of money that a guy like Hudson made, you're probably not going to re-up him when his contract comes up. The Chiefs didn't do it, so we're probably not going to do it. The Ravens didn't do it with Osamelli. We're probably not going to do it. The idea behind the Green Bay philosophy of drafting and building is that you bringing in guys that you get in the 7th round, the 6th round, guys that have dropped down the draft board exactly like Vidal Alexander did, going out and getting guys like Feliciano that is, again, versatile. You could put him in there at guard, or you could put him in there at center. He can become the center that you have. Now what you're doing is you're investing money into the future of your organization, right? And then you continue to try to do that. There's way too much money on this offensive line. They got to deal with Penn, but obviously you're not going to be able to re-up with Osamelli and Hudson and Khalil Mack and Derek Carr and all of the other stars, the impact stars. So for right now, getting strong in the trenches and building up, that's what you do. Well, the same can be said here for the defense. If you take a look, Justin Ellis is going to replace Dan Williams. You're probably not going to re-up Dan Williams, right? Unless he comes at a decent price. If he wants to do a team-friendly deal, that's fine. If not, they've shown it in Green Bay. They're not going to keep you unless you're an impact player. And I don't see Dan Williams as being an impact player. I see him as being a very good player, but I don't see him as being an impact player per se. So again, Jelly Ellis is being groomed at this point to take over that spot. He's going to be the guy that we want you there for the long run. We drafted you. You're a part of this team. So, again, I wouldn't put too much into it. I don't think that takes place this year. Dan Williams is still under contract. They know what they've got with Dan Williams. So you put Dan Williams back in there. You sit him down for a minute. You say, look, kid, mature a little bit. Get into the team concept. Don't get lazy. Everybody here is working. You need to be working as well. And if you could do that, boom, okay, fine. So he gets his little slap on the wrist. He takes it as a slap on the wrist, but he goes out, he takes it seriously, he works hard, he comes back, he takes his position. And again, either Ellis beats him out outright, which would be a great thing, or, he backs up Dan Williams, which would also be a great thing. That leads us sort of into, again, the safety position. I mean, pretty much it's, the linebackers are pretty set. Bruce Irvin, Heaney, and Malcolm Smith. There's been a lot of talk about Heaney, and, it's preseason. It's training camp. You're out there. You're running around with a new defense. You're running some new concepts. You got some new players out there. Once you take that green dot, the defense, the responsibility of the defense is on you. So now it's not just what do I do, it's what does this entire defense do? And that takes a little bit of adjusting. He's going to be fine. He's got great coaches that are back there with him. Ken Norton Jr. and Jack Del Rio were both linebackers. They understand what it is that this kid needs to do. And I think that he's going to be fine. I mean, it's, people, I don't know, it's a weakness. The coaches obviously see something. We should probably side with them as opposed to just panicking because the first couple of practices, some guy gets beat by a tight end. Maybe the tight end ran a perfect route. I mean, somebody's got to get beat. Somebody's got to, make a play. That's the bottom line. It's going to happen that way. If it's consistent, okay, maybe there might be a problem. But again, we have to remember, like everything else, this is Ben Heaney's first time as the starter, wearing the green dot, being responsible for the entirety of the defense. That's going to take a little bit of an adjustment. And if they didn't think that he was capable of doing it, then obviously you bring somebody like Malcolm Smith in. But Malcolm Smith did such a good job last year at his position. I think that's where you want him to be. So maybe moving Neron Ball or Corey James into the middle. When we were part of the season ticket holder conference that Jack Del Rio and Reggie McKenzie gave, specifically said that it was going to be Ben Heaney who was the starter, and they really felt that Corey James was going to also start with him in the middle when they were in their 34 alignment. So, even though I don't put a lot of stock in that, I think Corey James is primarily a special teams player. He might see some extensive time in the middle of that field when they're in their 34 looks. So that's something just to kind of keep an eye on. But again, relax. It's we just started. They're just getting used to it. This is a new position. He's now responsible. It's a mental game. He has to get through the jitters of calling those defenses and lining people up. And, not only am I doing my job right, but did I call, it's tough. And usually they put that in the hands of a veteran. So the fact that they put it in Ben Heaney's hands tells you a little something. It makes me worry also, but I'm not super worried. It makes me worry because this is also a team that said, well, let's go with these young defensive backs. And that was a disaster last year. I like to temper it a little bit and say, let's give it a little bit of time. Let's see what it looks like. But I think that Ben Heaney, with those coaches that he has there in that new position, is going to do just fine. Again, the corners, Amerson and Sean Smith, no brainer. But then, Reggie Nelson and Carl Joseph. And here's something, we have no idea what we're going to get from these two players. We have an idea of what Reggie Nelson was able to do in Cincinnati. Whether or not he can repeat that or not, we don't know. Both of these guys, Carl Joseph and Reggie Nelson, they both missed training camp. I'm sorry, not training camp. They both missed the OTAs. They didn't get to practice with the team. They came in, and once they did start practicing, they were quickly it was shown that they were better than everybody else that is playing at the position. McDonald, Treywick, McGill, Nate Allen, those types of guys. The other thing is we don't know can Nate Allen stay healthy? This guy has been injured every season. He has the injury bug. He's going to be injured at some point this season. So going into the season with him as the free safety would have been disastrous like it was, last year. He'll come back, he'll play a few games, he'll get injured, and then he'll be out. So you've got an aging player that it will be interesting to see whether or not he can play to the same form that he did last year, which was Pro Bowl caliber. You got a young rookie coming off of injury, and how is he going to do? We have no idea. We've never seen him before. We've never really seen Nate Allen extensively playing the position. So we saw him a little bit, but I didn't see anything, and I watch every game, so I didn't see anything that stood out to me that said, oh, Nate Allen, watch out for that guy. McDonald, Treywick, McGill, we don't know anything about these players. So this is a position that could use some stability. Now, if the positive thing is that Reggie Nelson did a good job in a defense that is very similar to ours. They provided a pass rush. They had zone corners that basically dropped back and took advantage of watching the quarterback. And their quarterbacks had to throw a few seconds too early, and he has the range to get there, and he has the hands to pick off those passes. So that's a good thing. He would appear to fit very well into this single high defense. Carl Joseph, same thing. He would appear to fit very well into this defense. He's rangy. He's a powerful tackler. He knows how to get through the garbage and make the tackle. I watched a ton of film on him, and you'd see that there'd be, a bunch of guys running around trying to make a tackle, and, this guy would just weave through traffic and just make the hit. So I'm excited about this kid. I'm not worried about the injury. I'm not worried about the knee. But after that, it's a drop-off. Like I said, we don't know what Nate Allen brings to the table. He may as well be McDonald, McGill, Treywick, Hall, or Hackett, any of the guys that they got back there. We just don't know at this point what we would get out of him if he stayed healthy for 16 games. Would we get a Pro Bowler? Would we get, somebody that was... We just never noticed, right? He just never popped up on our radar. So, it will be interesting to see this, how they come out, what they choose to do how much playing time Autry and guys like McGee and James Cowser and Leon Orr are going to get. That's a guy that I'm excited about. But, you know, on this particular depth chart, he's not even backing up the starters. He's basically, you know, the third stringer that's going to be coming in. So we're still going to see him, but we're going to see him against really subpar competition. You know, he'll be in there with the likes of Latham and you know, Iddings and some of those types of guys in there, you know, in garbage time. I, for one, would like to see what he can do against, you know, some good competition. You know, the at least the second teamers against the Cardinals, and hopefully he does move up, because I think that he has a tremendous amount of talent. You know, it was maturity. He kind of came out of college, had some maturity issues, but this is a guy that I believe, again, can be a disruptive force in the interior of this defensive line. He plays the run well, but he is like, he's a beast in terms of the pass rush that he brings to the table. At least he was in college. So again, it'd be good to see him making some strides. Well, that's probably going to wrap it up for today's show. Again, the Knight should be back tomorrow. We should be doing a show tomorrow. If not, then I will be doing the show again solo. But he will certainly, he should be back tomorrow, but he will certainly be back on Wednesday. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. This may have been hard to do without the Knight here, but I did the best that I could on short notice. So once again, thank you, guys, and go ahead and like the video and subscribe to our page. Take care, Raider Nation.
Hey there, I'm Jason Smith, also known as the Oakland Knight. We'd like to thank you for watching the Will to Win broadcast here on YouTube. And if you would like to stay up to date for more content like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below. Or you could click any one of the videos on the side to watch more great videos. Thank you once again, and stay Raider strong.